I want you to pause for a second and remember the silence at the end of Avengers Endgame. Not the cheers, not the portals, not even the snap. I mean the quiet after everything was done. Thanos was dust. Tony Stark was gone. And the universe felt strangely calm, like the surface of the ocean right before a storm. When I first watched that ending, something felt unfinished to me. Steve Rogers stepping into the quantum realm to return the Infinity Stones seemed like closure, a clean epilogue. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was the moment where Marvel hid its biggest secret. What if the most important event in MCU history never happened on screen at all? What if Steve's final mission wasn't about fixing the past, but secretly rewriting the future of the entire multiverse? Today, I want to break down a theory that connects Steve Rogers, the Ancient One, and a shadow waiting in the dark, a name Marvel hasn't spoken yet, but one that changes everything: Dr. Doom. When Steve goes back to return the Time Stone, the movie wants us to believe it's simple. He arrives on the rooftop of the Sanctum Sanctorum in 2012, hands the stone back to the Ancient One, and leaves. End of story. But Marvel never shows us that moment, and in the MCU, what we don't see is often more important than what we do. I started asking myself why they avoided that scene. The Ancient One wasn't just any sorcerer. She could see countless possible futures, just like Doctor Strange later would. She knew about Thanos long before the Avengers did, and she knew that Stephen Strange would one day become the Sorcerer Supreme. So here's the question that changed everything for me. If she knew all of that, wouldn't she also know about the greatest threat the multiverse would ever face? This theory suggests that when Steve arrived on that rooftop, the Ancient One wasn't alone. In the shadows stood another figure, hidden behind metal and genius, already planning far beyond Thanos. That figure was Dr. Doom. At first, the idea feels impossible. The Ancient One helping Dr. Doom sounds like a betrayal of everything she stands for. She's calm, wise, balanced. Doom is ego, control, domination. But the MCU has taught us again and again that morality becomes complicated when the stakes are infinite. The Ancient One understood something terrifying. Thanos was never the real endgame. He was a symptom, not the disease. The true cancer in the multiverse was Kang, or as we later learned, He Who Remains. Kang didn't conquer with brute force. He conquered with timelines. He erased entire realities before they could even fight back. And according to this theory, there was one enemy Kang feared more than anyone else. Not the Avengers, not the Fantastic Four, Dr. Doom. In countless timelines, Doom's intellect and ambition always led him to challenge Kang's control. So Kang did the only thing he could. He pruned every timeline where Doom could rise. The Ancient One saw this. She saw a future where free will itself was strangled. And that's where her alliance with Doom began. Dr. Doom needed to survive across timelines, and the Ancient One needed Kang gone. Their partnership wasn't about good or evil. It was about necessity. Doom understood that Kang couldn't be defeated head-on. The TVA, Alioth, and the Sacred Timeline made sure of that. Any direct rebellion would be erased before it began. So Doom played the long game. A game that required patience, sacrifice, and manipulation on a cosmic scale. The Ancient One guided events subtly, making sure certain futures remained possible. And this is where Avengers Endgame becomes more than a victory lap. Time travel wasn't just a desperate plan invented by Tony Stark. According to this theory, it was the key that Doom and the Ancient One needed. By allowing the Avengers to fracture time itself, they created cracks in Kang's perfect system. Cracks that would eventually grow into something unstoppable. Endgame wasn't the Avengers winning. It was the first successful move against Kang's control. Now think back to Infinity War, to that quiet moment on Titan when Doctor Strange looks into the future. 14 million possibilities. Only one path to victory. I used to believe that meant defeating Thanos. But now I think Thanos was never the real target. Strange wasn't looking for a future where they won a battle. He was looking for a future where the multiverse survived. And that future required Thanos to win, at least temporarily. Strange giving up the Time Stone was not surrender. It was alignment. He saw the same truth the Ancient One did. Thanos was a blunt instrument, destructive but predictable. Kang was something else entirely. Strange allowed the snap to happen. He allowed 5 years of suffering. Because without that loss, Tony Stark never invents time travel. Without time travel, Loki never escapes with the Tesseract. And without Loki's escape, the TVA never gets involved. Every painful step was necessary. The one winning future wasn't about stopping Thanos. It was about setting Doom free. That's why those leaked concept arts showing Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom together matter so much. Strange understands that Doom isn't a simple villain. He's a necessary counterweight to a far worse tyrant. Doom is ambition unchained, but Kang is destiny enslaved. In a universe controlled by Kang, no one truly chooses anything. Doom, for all his darkness, believes in will, even if it's his own. Strange saw that the multiverse needed chaos to breathe again. That's why he stayed silent. That's why he let the Avengers fail. The snap wasn't a mistake. It was a sacrifice written into the timeline long before Thanos ever snapped his fingers. The Ancient One, Doom, and Strange were all playing different roles in the same cosmic script. And Steve Rogers was about to become the most important piece on the board. Steve's role begins with what looks like a mistake. The Battle of New York. Loki escapes with the Tesseract. We're told it's an accident caused by Tony and Scott. But in a story this precise, accidents don't exist. Steve needed Loki to escape, because Loki needed to be captured by the TVA. Loki's journey through the TVA leads him directly to He Who Remains. And that meeting changes everything. Loki learns the truth about the sacred timeline, about pruning, about how Kang controls reality itself. By the end of his journey, Loki becomes something entirely new, the god of stories, the being who holds the multiverse together. When Loki breaks the sacred timeline, Kang's grip weakens. Branches grow. Possibilities return. And in that explosion of freedom, something else becomes possible again. Dr. Doom's existence. Loki didn't mean to help Doom, but that's the brilliance of the plan. Everyone played their part without knowing the full picture. So where does Steve Rogers fit into all of this emotionally? Why would he ever agree to help someone like Doom? The answer is painfully human. Peggy Carter. When Steve returned the Time Stone, Doom didn't threaten him. He offered him something. A life. A chance to stop being a soldier. Doom showed Steve a protected timeline, one that could exist outside Kang's control, a place where Steve could live quietly with Peggy, grow old, and finally rest. But there was a cost. Steve couldn't interfere. He had to watch history unfold, even when it hurt. Hydra, Bucky, tragedy after tragedy. Steve accepted because that's who he is. He sacrifices himself emotionally so the larger plan can survive. That's why the old man on the bench at the end of Endgame isn't just a man who got his happy ending. He's a man who paid for it with decades of silence. But in the MCU, deals with Doctor Doom never end cleanly. That protected timeline was never meant to last forever. Doom needed Kang gone first. And once that goal was achieved, everyone else became expendable. If this theory holds, begins with that illusion of peace shattering. Doom no longer needs the Ancient One. He no longer needs Steve Rogers. The multiverse is free, but freedom was never Doom's final goal. Control was. Battleworld. One reality forged from the collapse of all others. A throne at the center of existence. God Emperor Doom. And the first casualty of that ambition is Steve's quiet life. His family. Peggy. Everything he was promised. Doom doesn't kill Steve. He lets him live with the loss. Because Doom understands something cruel. A broken hero is more poetic than a dead one. That destruction doesn't end Steve. It forges him. For the second time, Steve Rogers loses everything. The first time, it was war. The second time, it was trust. Doom's betrayal transforms Steve's story from a peaceful ending into a final mission. He no longer fights for ideals alone. He fights for accountability. This is where the legend of the first Avenger returns, not as a symbol, but as a man who refuses to let gods play chess with human lives. Whether Steve returns to his prime or stands as an old warrior leading from the front, his purpose is clear. Assemble what remains. Unite what is broken. Because Doom made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the one man who never stays down. The man who can do this all day. The moment Steve Rogers watches his protected timeline collapse, something fundamental inside him changes. This isn't the young man from Brooklyn who jumped on grenades, and it isn't even the weary soldier who chose duty over love in the 1940s. This is a man who has lived a full life, raised children, loved deeply, and then had all of it erased in seconds. When Doom leaves him alive in the ruins of that dying reality, it isn't mercy, it's mockery. Doom wants Steve to understand that everything he was given was conditional, that his happiness existed only because Doom allowed it to exist. And as Steve stands there, surrounded by the echoes of a life that no longer exists, he realizes something terrifyingly clear. This isn't just another villain threatening Earth. This is a god rewriting meaning itself. And for the first time, Steve Rogers isn't fighting to protect the world he knows. He's fighting to prove that no one, not even a god, has the right to decide which lives matter and which ones don't. This is where Avengers Doomsday stops being a standard superhero movie and becomes something far darker. Doom doesn't conquer with armies first. He conquers with collapse. Incursions begin to happen across realities, worlds smashing into each other, heroes dying without ever knowing why. From Doom's perspective, this is mercy. One unified reality is easier to control, easier to perfect. He believes chaos is cruelty. Steve sees it differently. Steve sees lives erased, choices stolen, futures rewritten without consent. And this philosophical divide is what fuels the coming war. Doom believes order is salvation. Steve believes freedom is worth any cost. This isn't about strength or power levels anymore. It's about who gets to define what a better world actually means. And that ideological clash is far more dangerous than any punch thrown in anger. As Doom constructs Battleworld, fragments of countless realities stitched together by raw cosmic power, familiar faces begin to appear. Variants of heroes we know. Some broken, some corrupted, some who never became heroes at all. Doom positions himself as their savior, the only being capable of holding reality together. Many of them believe him. That's the most frightening part. Doom doesn't rule through fear alone. He rules through logic. He shows them what happens without him. Endless destruction, infinite suffering. He argues that a single controlled reality is kinder than infinite dying ones. And for a moment, even the audience is meant to wonder if he's right. That's what makes Doom so dangerous. He isn't insane. He's convinced. And conviction backed by godlike power is the most unstable force in existence. Steve, meanwhile, becomes something unexpected. He's no longer the strongest fighter in the room. He's not the smartest. He doesn't have magic or cosmic energy. What he has is memory. He remembers worlds before Doom. He remembers choice. He remembers loss not as a statistic, but as names and faces. Steve becomes the moral anchor of a shattered multiverse. He finds heroes who've given up, variants who've accepted Doom's rule, and he does what he's always done best. He reminds them who they are. Not through speeches about destiny, but through shared pain. He tells them about Peggy, about children who never existed, about the cost of letting someone else decide your future. And slowly, quietly, a resistance forms. Not an army, a belief. Doctor Strange plays a crucial role here, and this is where his arc truly pays off. Strange understands Doom's power better than anyone. He's seen the future Doom is trying to prevent, and he's seen the one Doom is creating. Strange knows that brute force won't work. Doom is too powerful, too prepared. Instead, Strange helps Steve do something far more dangerous. He helps him create doubt. Not in Doom's enemies, but in Doom's system itself. Battleworld is held together by Doom's will, but also by the belief that his way is the only way. If that belief fractures, so does his control. Strange begins subtly unraveling the logic that keeps Doom's empire stable, showing cracks where compassion was sacrificed for efficiency, where individuality was erased for symmetry. Meanwhile, Loki's presence lingers like a ghost over everything. As the god of stories, Loki understands narratives better than anyone. He knows Doom's story, the orphan genius, the wounded ego, the desperate need to control reality so it can never hurt him again. Loki doesn't confront Doom directly. He does something more subversive. He rewrites the narrative around Steve. In stories across Battleworld, Steve Rogers becomes a symbol again. Not Captain America the soldier, but Steve Rogers, the man who keeps standing up, the one constant across realities. Doom, who believes himself above stories, underestimates their power. He forgets that myths shape belief, and belief shapes reality. And slowly Doom's perfect order begins to tremble. The confrontation between Steve and Doom isn't a simple fight. It's a conversation stretched across collapsing worlds. Doom accuses Steve of hypocrisy, of rejecting peace because it didn't come on his terms. Doom argues that Steve's morality is small, bound to individual suffering, while Doom sees the bigger picture. Steve listens, and then he responds with something devastatingly simple. He tells Doom that a world where people don't get to choose is already dead. That survival without freedom isn't living. That Doom didn't save the multiverse. He just made himself its jailer. And for the first time, Doom hesitates. Not because Steve is right logically, but because Steve is right emotionally. Doom sees in Steve what he lost long ago. The ability to accept pain without needing to dominate it. That hesitation is everything. It's the opening the resistance needs. Not to overpower Doom, but to remind reality itself that Doom isn't inevitable. The multiverse begins to resist being shaped into one form. Variants regain memories. Worlds push back against forced unity. Doom fights harder, tightening his grip, but the harder he squeezes, the more fragile everything becomes. This is the irony of absolute control. It requires infinite effort to maintain. Steve doesn't deliver the final blow. He never does. Instead, he makes the final stand. He refuses to kneel. Even as Doom towers over him, godlike and furious, Steve stands, broken but unyielding. I can do this all day isn't a threat here. It's a promise. In the end, Doom isn't defeated by strength. He's undone by choice. Faced with a multiverse that refuses to stay silent, Doom is forced to decide. Double down and destroy everything, or let go and risk chaos. And for a brief moment, the mask cracks. Doom remembers why he started this path in the first place. Fear, loss, the need to never be powerless again. That moment of vulnerability is enough. The power, sustaining Battleworld fractures. Realities begin separating, not cleanly, but alive. The multiverse survives, scarred but free. Doom vanishes, not dead, but diminished, his godhood stripped away by the very reality he tried to enslave. Steve Rogers doesn't get his happy ending back. Peggy doesn't return. His children remain memories. But Steve doesn't ask for anything. He's done that part of his life. He watches new heroes step forward, new worlds rebuild, new stories begin. His role was never to rule or to win. It was to endure. To remind gods and monsters alike that power without empathy is hollow. As the multiverse moves on, Steve fades into legend again, not as a king or a god, but as something far rarer. Proof that one ordinary man's refusal to give up can change everything. And that's why I think this theory fits the MCU so perfectly. It recontextualizes Endgame not as an ending, but as the first domino. It turns Steve's quiet goodbye into the opening move of a cosmic war. It transforms Doom into a villain who isn't just powerful, but terrifyingly understandable. And it reminds us why these stories matter. Not because of explosions or spectacle, but because at their core, they're about choices. Who we choose to be when everything is taken away. If Marvel commits to this path, Avengers Secret Wars won't just be the biggest crossover ever made. It'll be the most personal story the MCU has ever told. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, share it with fellow Marvel fans, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories hiding beneath the surface of your favorite movies.